Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday, May 6, 2026. This is a special budget meeting here for City of Capitola. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Orbach.
Here.
Councilmember Westman. Here. Vice Mayor Jensen.
Here.
And Mayor Morgan.
Here. Would you all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance? Any additions or deletions?
No changes to the agenda tonight.
And any additional materials?
Staff distributed an updated attachment to item 5A.
Wonderful. This will open up to oral communications from members of the public. Anything that is not on tonight's agenda may be addressed, and you'll have your 3 minutes. If you'd wish to speak, come on up. Don't see any. So we'll jump into big number 5A here, the presentation of our proposed fiscal year 2026-2027 budget. Tonight we're just receiving the proposed budget, and we will be giving direction. Here's Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So as the Mayor just stated, this is the first study session for the fiscal year 26-27 proposed budget. I'll start off by just kind of going over the process and some summary high-level information before we get into specific details. So the draft budget that we're reviewing tonight was published on April 17th. It was reviewed last night at the Finance Advisory Committee meeting. We have this meeting this evening, and then we'll have a second budget hearing, which will include any follow-up from this evening, as well as our capital improvement program budget on May 21st, and then additional hearings if needed in June. The budget needs to be adopted to be effective July 1st, no later than June 25th of this year. So it's high-level budget summary. We have a proposed budget has approximately 1.2 million increase in general fund revenues. However, kind of the same warning that we had last year, local economy may be impacted by uncertainty at the national level. I think last year was ICE, this year is the war and ICE, so we'll see what 26-27 has for us. Measure Y is, as was last year, being utilized to provide public safety and essential services as allowed within the ballot measure. Just a reminder, Measure Q and Measure S were two new. Well, Measure Q was new last year. It provides $200,000 annually for parks and open space, and we're using that to fund 2 parks worker positions, and then we have some surplus over that goes into the parks. And then Measure S is the parcel tax, countywide parcel tax for the library system, and we are getting $165,000. They have surplus funds. It generated more revenue than the parcel tax generated more revenue than they thought, mostly because housing prices went up so much. So there's surplus funds coming back to the city, $165,000 a year, 21 years. This was the first year, so we have 20 years left. The first $856,000 of that is repaying the general fund for general fund contributions to the library project. Once that's paid off, then those funds they're restricted now, but we're repaying the loan. They're restricted for the library for a future project. We have approximately 1.1 million increase in general fund expenditures. 600,000 of that is directly to personnel costs, and the majority of that is due to CalPERS. A little bit more summary information. We're estimating our ending fund balance on June 30, 2027 at 125. That was, last night I reported 133. I picked up the wrong, I was picking up the 26 number, not 27. Again, PERS continues to be our major threat, but we do have a PERS contingency reserve that currently has a balance of 1.8 million. That was also corrected from last night. I had forgotten to add the interest earnings, so we had about 200,000 of interest earnings, so we're up to 1.8 million. Our unfunded actuarial liability actually decreased from 35 million to 34 million, however, still up from 21 million in 2024. And even with the decrease, our annual payment increased from 2.9 million to 3.3 million, which is up from 2.1 in 2024. And then I have a chart that'll lay that out a little on a couple more slides. We continue to rely heavily on sales tax and TOT. And just as a reminder, Measure Y does sunset in 2034. And our reserve balances are still below our target balances as we continue to wait for FEMA and Cal OES reimbursements from the storm damage to the wharf. This is our 5-year multi-year projection. These are on the top is our kind of key revenues and what assumptions have gone into this proposed budget. So property tax, 5%, that's been pretty consistent for the last few years. We get 2% annually kind of automatically, and then just with the houses selling and them resetting, we get an additional 3%. Sales tax, we have at 2%, and we also have below on the bottom there, you see new revenue for $100,000. We have $100,000 of estimated sales tax revenue that will be tied to the new Tesla dealership that we anticipate being open a half a year. And then we have $200,000 running out in future years. The one note that I'll make is Tesla, we've done some research on what average Tesla dealerships do for what we think we're going to get over there in that space. So we think those are pretty decent numbers, but Tesla dealerships vary from location and their sales can vary greatly. So it's one we'll keep, once they open in hopefully the fall, we'll keep a close eye on. TOT, it's a 3.5% bump from a budget to budget, but our actuals are actually coming in last year above budget, and this year they're tracking a little above budget. So that's more of a correction into what's actually happening. Business license, kind of flat, steady 1% growth. Building permits, we anticipate an increase in 2027 for a few projects, but then as of right now, once those projects are done, we'll kind of go back to our normal annual revenue. The cannabis tax, I'm hoping this is my last correction to this. It seems to be stable now with the 2 shops that we have open. So this 3% reduction should get them into what they're actually performing at, and then just a 1% growth. And then as of right now, our parking revenue is remaining flat. There's no change to the parking rates. So the impact to the fund balance, and one of the things that was mentioned last night during the FAC meeting was that I don't have a table up there for the expenditure side that matches the revenue side. So in the next budget hearing, I'll have the same thing for the expenditure side that shows the assumptions. They're primarily personnel is based on current MOUs. So whatever the current MOUs are, that's what I forecast going forward. And then everything else has CPI inflators, but they can vary from one line item to the other. At any rate, you'll see that the first 4 years there are close to budgeted. I know the 29 and 30 are a little further away from zero than we'd like to see, but in the grand scheme of things for the size of our budget, that's pretty close. 2032, I suspect there's a bad formula somewhere in there, so I'm going to go back and see if that's a real number or if there's a correction needed there. And this is our general fund summary. This is where I can't read them. General fund summary that shows our expenditures exceeding revenues by just under $8,300. There's been some changes since this draft came out that'll cover that difference, but I didn't want to make those changes until we had this conversation. And again, estimated ending fund balance at a little over 125,000. So the assumptions that you saw the slide before last, this is the dollar amounts that go with that. So property tax, we're estimating an increase of 172,000. Sales tax, the 1% sales tax, the Bradley Burns, 127 of that is just our normal, and then 100 of that is tied to the Tesla dealer. The district taxes, that's the 2% increase. TOT, that 3.5 that I discussed a little bit. Charges for services is increasing 181. The majority of that is the reopening of the community center and the return of our classes to full capacity. Parking citations, we're increasing. I have 250 there from what was approved in the budget. It's actually a $450,000 increase from where we adjusted at mid-year. But the reason for that is that we are now finally fully staffed, and we suspect the increased parking citation rates will kind of come into fruition now. Grants, we have increases of about 107,000, and that 107 is primarily in PD for different operations grants that they have. And then other revenues, which is just a combination of everything else that we have in there, is 105,000 for the total of 1.2. This is just kind of a different way to look at the same thing. So general fund revenues, again, expected to increase 1.2 million. The TOT, we're tracking at about 2.5, 2.6. So we're raising that to 2.25 to 2, and we're raising that to 2.3. 2.5 to 2.3. Sorry, I screwed that up 3 times. So it's at 2.5 million going to 2,500,000 going to 2,300,000. 2.2. But I'm saying our actual receipts were 2,500,000. Our budget's 2,200,000. Actual receipts were 2,500,000. 2,205,50. Thank you. 2,250,000. Man, I should have just typed that number up there. Anyways, that's the reason we're raising. It's about a $50,000 increase over what our actuals are today. No. Sales tax, again, represents about 45%, and TOT 10%, for a total of 55% of total general fund revenues just from those two sources. Our top 25 sales tax generates about 70% of that total, and our top 5 is just under 40%. The village, and this is village from Trestle to Ocean, is about 7.5%. And then the area we call Upper Village from Trestle that picks up everything along Bay Avenue and Gales and all of that stuff. And the supermarket is another 7.5%. Property tax, the 5% growth rate is consistent with what the county is seeing across the county. We get that estimate from them. And then again, charges for services was the increased classes, or not increase, but just returning to full capacity. Revenue by category, this stays pretty much the same each year. We're very dependent on taxes. And then the next biggest one at 78%, and then charges for services a second, and it's all the way down to 12%. And everything else kind of fills in. As far as proposed tax revenues, our 1% makes up about 38%. But I would just say sales tax is 55, and the TOT, that says 13.4. I'll have to double check that. The takeaway on this for me is property taxes. When I first came here 9 years ago, was around 14 or 15%, and now it's 21%, and that just shows that property tax is growing much faster than sales tax. And as a reminder, we do have 0.75% of our TOT restricted, with about a little over $70,000 split 50-50 between the BIA and the chamber, and about $67,000 going to early childhood youth programs. And I think 56 of that is in the community grant program and the rest in recreation. On the expenditure side, so the $1.1 million of increase breaks down with personnel representing $588,000 of that. Contract services and supplies are up a little bit across the board, and then training and memberships and ISFs are down. However, on the ISFs, I will note that our other financing uses, that $300,000 increase, is the $200,000 that we program annually in the equipment ISF. Just when on the 17th, I didn't have quotes for vehicles yet, so we're just showing it kind of as a placeholder, and then we'll come back at the next hearing with the actual vehicles for approval. And then our compensated absences is we've had a lot of people retire. We've gone through a couple of things. We froze the payoffs during the pandemic, and then we've had a number of long-term employees retire, and we cash out when they leave. We cash out all of their accrued vacation time, and that fund got a little upside down. So this is just getting that back into a positive position. On the 588,000 for personnel, salaries represent 42,000 of that. And the reason is that if you just took our fully staffed budget from what we approved last year and added the MOU, the 3% COLA and the flex, it would have increased our budget by about 255,000. With the vacant, we're recommending that holding a vacant MSO position represents 100,000 of savings. We also this year do not have an IT system specialist. So that was 70 to 75,000-ish fully loaded. And then we've had, I want to say 4 or 5 employees between planning and maintenance that have been at the top of their classification, top step, that have left, and we're filling those now with entry level. So there's about $40,000 of savings just from that natural turnover. So that's the reason it's only $42,000 for the salary piece. The part-time seasonal is increasing 52,000, and that is, I think, primarily due to increased capacity in camp, I think. Overtime is increasing 57,000, and that is tied to the PD grants that I was mentioning earlier. The CalPERS UAL, or the CalPERS cost total increase was 460, 376 of that coming from the UAL. 84,000 is the normal cost that we're just paying each pay period just to pay for the benefits for the current employees. So I'm going to actually let Jamie go through this slide.
This is a slide that Jim and I worked on because, I think from everyone's standpoint, the question is sort of what's going on with Capitola and CalPERS is a relevant question because it is the story in the budget these last couple of years. And the purpose of this slide is to sort of show that we're not alone. Yes. So what this is these are, I think that's 6 other peer cities that we've compared ourselves to in the past. And it's showing the UAL payment in each city starting in 22, 23, and then moving forward in time with the following 4 fiscal years beyond that. So it's 5 fiscal years of data. What you're seeing that the green colors, the lighter green colors, those are decreases. So in 23, 24, we all saw decreases in our UAL payment. And at that point, when we saw that, that had been what had been forecast since the Great Recession, that we were going to have this ramp up that was going to take 10 years to ramp up, and then we were going to be at this peak, and we were going to stay at the peak for 5 or 6 years, and it was going to start coming down. And then CalPERS lost some money one year, and it all went to heck in a handbasket. And so then you can see what the increases have been in each one of these different cities over time. And again, color-coded, the darker the orange, the more the percentage increase. And so you can see Capitola's increase has not actually been as bad as some of the others. I think our total number was like 48% from the low of 23, 24, and some of the other cities I think were as high as 55. So this is a problem that cities across the state are facing. And it's definitely, it varies by city how much of a challenge it is. And it has to do with, are you growing? If you're a growing city, if you have more employees, if you have a much bigger budget than you had 30 years ago, it's much less of a problem. Capitola is not in that situation, so it definitely is hitting us pretty hard.
This next slide here is showing our expenditures by department. So you can see, no surprise, police is our biggest department, followed by public works. That's been pretty consistent the whole time. The change on this, and I think what I'll do for future slides, I have some notes from our meeting last night, is I have the UAL we used to account for that in the departments and spread it out throughout the whole budget. And it was really hard to tell we talked about this UAL increase, but it was really hard to see. So I pulled it out of the departments and put it all into personnel, which now makes personnel like it's a massive department. It's still a department of one. It's just we have a $3.2 million bill that's getting charged there. So for this, I'll probably have to take that out and kind of highlight what that is so that, because the personnel department from a staffing perspective should really be closer percentage to like city council. Or no, I'm sorry, city manager. No, yeah, city council. Should be about the same. By category, again, no surprise here. Public agency, we're a service provider, so almost 69% of our costs are tied directly to personnel. another 18.5 to contract services, and then the balance kind of spread out there up on the chart. From the so that was all general fund revenue. From restricted special revenue, just some high level numbers. All of our road funds, which is the SB1 road maintenance and rehabilitation money, our county measure D, and gas tax is about $950,000 restricted for just roads. We have the youth funds that I mentioned, 67,000 there. Business assistance of 180,000. Housing right now we have $83,000 programmed, and we have a balance of $2 million. And there's a Mid-Penn project that if they get approved on that loan, then that'll help fund that project once that comes through. We have the parks and open space. The Measure Q money that I mentioned is 200,000. All other special revenues, library, wharf, all of the different things that we do, total 500 public art, 520,000. There is the potential grant revenue. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means of anywhere from 1 to 6 million. It's just we have to apply for those grants, and we won't know for a while if we get those. So it's not programmed into the budget, but something we're tracking. Some potential one-time revenue. So we've talked a little bit about one of our TOT payers is in the process of paying some outstanding TOT. So there's a potential for $300,000 coming in there. Building permits, if that Mid-Penn project goes, we'll see an uptick in building permit revenue. Again, not programmed in because we're waiting to see how that plays out. Insurance claims, we've submitted another claim with our insurance carrier for the restaurant building that we had to take down, so we'll hopefully get something out of that. The FEMA Cal OES reimbursements, hopefully we see that soon. We just keep, it's like rinse and repeat right now. They keep making the same requests. We keep providing data, so hopefully, I haven't got any requests for a while, so hopefully we'll get a check soon, but who knows? I think with FEMA, some of the government shutdown slowed that stuff down, but I think this is just kind of FEMA's normal business process. There's still money outstanding from the 2020 CZU fires at the county. They're just incredibly slow when they're reimbursing for you to rebuild. They'll reimburse quick on your emergency response, but the rebuilding reimbursements seem to be really slow. From a staffing, there is no change in staffing this year, holding staffing exactly the same. The only footnote to that would be in the police department. We're recommending freezing the one MSO, not getting rid of it, just freezing it for the time. And I am going to turn it back over to Jamie, or we can take questions now if we want.
Do you want to pause and take questions? Or one thing I will note is that staffing level is the same, unchanged from where it was in 2000, 2001. So I know that we've heard a lot in the past. We've gotten feedback about how the city has increased its staffing significantly, but we're at the same level that we were 27 years ago. We can do questions now, or we can talk about sort of the priorities, the projects, kind of move into the next phase of the budget hearing. Madam Mayor? Okay. So as we prepare the budget, we went back to the strategic plan, which council adopted relatively recently, looking at the different sorts of pillars that we'd established: accountable government, sustainable infrastructure, attainable housing, and the others. And then also prepared sort of draft goals, and we can bounce to the next slide, for the council to review. For the council to review during the mid-year goal-setting session. This is the same stuff that you saw at that point. I think there was general consensus that these were on the right track, so we have included them in this year's proposed budget. And then next slide, please. These were all the items that the council identified. This is just the public works items during that meeting, that there was a majority of council mentioned it, or it was already included in some element of the overall work plan. So at this point, these are the projects that are included in this year's budget and work plan. These are the public works ones. And then these are the projects in the other departments. I will note in community and economic development, we talk about the impact fees prior to mall submission. Katie's going to talk a little bit more about that during her budget presentation because there's some nuance there, and I think we're still doing some work about how that's going to get funded. So these are all the items. Again, these were items that came up during the budget hearing, and either a majority of the council mentioned it, or they were already sort of included in some other part of the budget. So, for example, Claire's Complete Street, I think one councilman mentioned that as a goal, and the 41st Avenue Corridor Plan does include Claire's, looking at making it a complete street, as well as 41st and Capitola Road. So then there were a number of items that were brought up by less than a majority of council and weren't sort of at this point included in the budget. And so I do want to call your attention to those. And if there is a majority of the council that does want us to add those, cost it out, figure out a way to incorporate it into the work plan, you should let us know. For a variety of reasons, whether it was budget or whether it was, potentially controversial items or whether they were items that would take a lot of staff work. So again, these are items that if the council as a whole would like to take a look at and ask more questions about, or see whether the majority of the council would like to either put the funding or the resources into it, we should talk about that.
Talk about it now.
We can.
I only wanted to mention at the FAC meeting last night, we did talk about looking at evaluating parking rates as one of the things people felt would be a good way to perhaps increase some revenue. So that's the only one I wanted to mention.
Okay. So we did take a look at that. We updated it about a year and a half ago. Is that right? 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago? That's 2.5 years ago. And so we looked at the inflation rate since then, and it's been about 15-cent increase. When we last did it, council had said, let's make sure because at that point it was a 50% increase. And so we were trying to stay on top of it. We can definitely look at it. We can bring it back. I guess the point in time of when we made the decision to increase the rates, because I did put in the calculator from January of 24. So if we went back to maybe March or April of the year before 23.
My recollection, and the mayor was there last night as well, was the discussion was not only about, inflation, but the cost of parking in jurisdictions around us seems to be significantly higher than ours. So I think the thought was to look at it not only based on inflation, but, what is parking costing in the areas around us, and would it be appropriate for us to, do an increase? Because I understand we do want to do a 25 cent or a 50 cent. We don't want to do 14 or 18 cent kind of increases. But there was pretty strong support, I think, for doing that.
Absolutely. I guess a follow-up question to that would be, what would be a timeline for changing the rates? Would it be a ton of staff time? I'm just trying to think of the impact and then how quickly we could possibly turn it around.
So good news and bad news about that. So the good news is that historically our parking rates were actually specified in our LCP, which meant that we had to submit the change to the Coastal Commission and then wait about 6 months for them to either approve or deny it. We changed that, and the Coastal Commission supported us, so we can move forward and we can issue our own permits to do it. The Coastal Commission can appeal. So if they looked at the rates that we did and said, whoa, you're restricting coastal access, they could appeal the decision and that would put the brakes on it. So we do have more local control, so it's a relatively easy process. In the past, we have had a council's formed an advisory committee. The 2 times that I've been around to see this happen. And so there's been a lot of committee meetings, and that actually has taken a fair bit of staff time. If the council just wants a report on this, and we can come back and say, here's what inflation was from this point in time, here's what it cost to park in downtown Santa Cruz on the Santa Cruz Wharf, pick a couple other, maybe Monterey, and, identify a couple options, that's not a lot of staff time.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
I agree that we should move forward. That's majority of council. I think in looking at the budget, it's kind of grim, and we need to find other sources of revenue. And that seems like an easy one to tap into, especially if it's comparable to our neighboring cities. I think there's argument to make that we should be charging a little bit more.
we can do that. I like adding items that generate revenue.
While we're talking about other jurisdictions, it'd also be nice to look at TOT tax. The city of Santa Cruz has a higher TOT tax. Maybe that would be another thing we can eye and look into.
So we are slightly lower than the county and the city of Santa Cruz. I think we're 1% less on the hotels and 2% less on the vacation rentals. It does require voter approval, and help me with my math here, 2.2 million times 1.5%. That's probably a $20,000 to $30,000 swing. So I think that would be a question we would just need to ask ourselves: is it worth putting something like that on the ballot for 20 or 30,000? In general, my advice is usually like for 20 or 30,000, if we're going to put something on the ballot, let's have it for some specific, like we want to do an X, and that's what it's going to take to do an X. But it's certainly not going to sort of get us to long-term fiscal sustainability. And if you're asking voters, I think you want to be able to either point to either fiscal, something really strong. So that's my kind of take on that. I think when there's a thing that we really want to do, that could be a good opportunity to do that. But it isn't a ton of money.
I think it would be helpful if staff could just do sort of a one-page thing and sort of show us what other cities are and what, how much we would actually get. And hopefully that wouldn't take too much time.
That's easy.
I think to highlight what you just said, I'll just raise TOT, if that number is really accurate, $20,000 or $30,000, everyone can see the value of going through that kind of a process might not really be the payoff.
Yeah, and maybe is there like a blanket cost for us getting that on the ballot? Isn't it about?
If it's something that if we go on a regular, if we go on a regular election consolidated and it's one that we're already doing, the marginal cost isn't a ton.
Okay.
If we're trying to put it on, if we were to, for example, go on the that would be a lot. That'd be like $50,000.
Okay, cool. I just wanted background on that. Thank you.
Okay. We can add those. In fact, I think we can bring back some of the information probably at our next budget hearing.
Perfect.
Some of those things.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. So then we're going to get into the department overviews. And I think the first one up we have is City Manager's Department. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the key accomplishments from this last fiscal year. You'll recall the annexation feasibility study, which proved to be infeasible, was completed this last year. The website, the transition to .gov have been changes that have happened relatively recently. The kind of behind the scenes, there was a big negotiation process about how we were all going to participate in the RING program with the other jurisdictions. That's actually ongoing. We're talking now about whether or not we should be forming a joint powers authority to kind of own the assets, or whether we want to continue with the contract. We've done the town halls, doing much more community outreach. We put on the academy this year. We've done a lot of groundbreaking and a lot of events, and we just kicked off the districting process, which is going to be a real push for our department. So then looking ahead to next year, the districting process, I think, is front and center in everyone's mind as we move into the next fiscal year. We're going to have an election for 3 seats. We have the employee negotiations, which will be kicking off around 6 months from now with the new council. We've talked about doing an organizational study, looking at the lifeguard program. We actually have some plans to do that and bring in an expert in August to talk to the council a little bit about options there. And then we're also planning on, we've heard some feedback from the council and from the community, appreciation for the town hall that we did last year. And we're planning to do, I think, as long as council supports this, using the new community center to do another town hall this year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the next department, which I think might be Jim.
Thanks, Jamie. So as far as accomplishments for the Administrative Services Department in this current fiscal year, we continued the TOT vacation
Can you
rental
take a
audit
break
and
real quick?
enforcement program.
Sorry to interrupt you. Vice Mayor was just thinking it might be easier if we have questions per department to go through it that way, just so it's not a litany at the end. If anybody has any questions in regards to the City Manager Department. I would offer those up.
I just have a question. When you brought up the radio system, it seems like the fire department is not going to go on. Are we reevaluating, even though the council voted to go that direction? Is that the right step for us, and what the costs are and stuff like that? And maybe you could give us a little background on that.
So we are continuing to have conversations with the fire agencies. I've met with the CAO and city manager for Santa Cruz. I've met with the fire chiefs. I don't want to speak for the fire agencies, but they do recognize the benefit of being on a unified radio system. The question just comes down to costs. I'm still optimistic that there's going to be a solution, and we're going to get the fire agencies on board. Terminating the contract would be challenging. We could look into that if the council would like to. I think the challenge is that our police department obviously operates so closely with the sheriff, and not being on the same frequency. There's a lot that would be involved in that. So, and then on top of that, there are DOJ requirements eventually to get to these digital encrypted frequencies for law. So down the road, we would have those costs at some point on our own. So there is that other piece to consider.
Yeah, I can appreciate and I understand the commitment back and forth, but I felt at the council meeting it was kind of like the fire department was going to come around and everything. And as much as I think there was a partnership between our sheriff's department and everything on an emergency response like that, if you talk about emergency response for anything else in Capitola, the fire department's always there. And from my standpoint, I just think it's going to be awkward. So I hope they do come around, and I just want to see what your thoughts were regarding that. And it just seems like if it is such a big cost and the fire department's backing out, have we evaluated, does it really make sense for us to proceed that way if they're making such a strong statement that they're not going to?
I just wanted to add another comment that I agree with the city manager that I'm optimistic that fire is going to continue to consider their engagement. It's obviously a huge cost, and the sheriff's office recently submitted for a multi-million-dollar grant to help support the Ring project. So we're still waiting to find out if we're recipients of that grant, which would then bring our overall costs down. So it is in this limbo state, but I'm still, holding on to that optimistic viewpoint that there is a ton of benefit, and especially as we face challenges also with staffing with 911 dispatch and how we need to share channels and frequencies. There is a lot that would go into it if we were to back out and try to figure out how to stand up our own infrastructure that has challenges now.
Didn't I read something about Scotts Valley? They're on their own radio system. They're not going to participate, right? Right?
They are a part of Ring.
Oh, they are, because I thought I just read something about Jimmy Panetta gave them $685,000 grant towards the radio system.
I believe that was for their dispatch center.
Oh, maybe that's where they tacked in with radio. I was thinking it was the Ring,
Yeah.
but
Scotts Valley is a member of the Ring program.
okay. So the 685 was for the dispatch center. That
I'm actually not familiar with the 685, but I think
They do operate their own.
they do operate their own dispatch, and I think I heard that.
okay.
So,
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, and I just wanted to see where we were at that thing, and hopefully, as we continue to bring up that we want the fire department to come along,
yeah.
they keep hearing the message.
The challenge, I think the challenge for the fire chiefs is that there's a lot of solidarity between the different fire agencies, right? But the reality is that the differences between the different fire agencies is enormous. Central Fire, Scotts Valley Fire are very well-funded operations. They're all very professional, but those guys really certainly have a lot of resources and a lot of opportunities. Some of the other little fire districts up in the hills, they operate with primarily volunteers. And so they may have, the way we've been allocating costs is by radio. And if you're giving out radios to 15 volunteer firefighters, your overall budget for a fire agency might be $600,000 a year. and they might have almost as many radios as the city of Capitola because they need all these volunteers. And so can they absorb the cost the same way? And so trying to thread that needle between the well-funded agencies like Central, like Scotts Valley Fire, and then trying to support some of the volunteer fire agencies. That's kind of been the rub, and they're sort of negotiating as a block. And so I do think that there's a solution. And I think, as the chief said, that we're gonna get there. It's gonna take a little bit.
All right, thank you.
Questions?
One question. So I'm really not certain that this is the right place, but it's about the city manager. Because on page 50, one of your goals you talk about is that the city manager is going to evaluate new ballot measures for revenue. And that may have changed, but we had quite a discussion at our FAC meeting last night, once again about Measure Y and how the community perceives, certain parts of the community perceive that the information they were given on the ballot measure, was not accurate. And if you study it, we know that the amounts change. The UAL number changed from what was anticipated when the ballot was put together to what actually happened. But I was thinking about, revenue and the fact that sometime in the future, we probably are going to need to go out and do some sort of measure to raise new revenue. And one way to eliminate that perception would be we have the PERS Trust Fund. And that's set up also to pay part of those PERS costs. And you could simply take, say, and I'm making this number up, $200,000 out of the PERS Trust Fund to help pay the UAL, I always get it wrong, UAL. And then that would allow you to say, we have set aside, $200,000 of Measure Y money that's going to be used for projects that people thought were going to be accomplished when that was passed on. So I think that's an idea that I would like to have us look at. It's really, sort of moving money around, but it does create, in my opinion, a better perception for, the people who are concerned that somehow, and I know the city didn't lie to them, I know all the money went into the general fund, I'm just trying to deal with the sort of public relations part of what happened, as I said, because I think at some point we're going to have to go out and ask people for more money, and we don't want them saying, well, the last time you came out, you said this and you didn't do it. And that would just be one way to accomplish that goal.
So we could. I think as you've proposed it, I think it's simply a trade-off. Obviously, that the PERS Trust is a little bit of, kind of an insurance policy for mall redevelopment. I think the only pitfall that I would really sort of be very concerned about is if we started to use that $200,000 then for ongoing operations. Because I think then you're using kind of one-time money, spending down a reserve for ongoing operations. You didn't propose it that way, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear. If it was proposed that we were going to use $200,000 of the UAL to offset that cost to implement some project in the community that the council felt was important to do so, as long as we're clear-eyed about the trade-off, that provides less of a buffer for mall redevelopment to close that hole.
No,
It's an option. It's an option we can discuss.
thank you. I mean, I don't know how other people feel about it, but I just think it's, if you had attended our meeting last night, it got spicy. I think, microphone. I think a lot of it has to do, thank you, Julio. I think a lot of it has to do with perception. And when you're talking about trying to, get a bond measure passed or raise new revenue, that perception becomes extremely important for the community.
Yeah, I wrote almost down what you were talking about. I almost think it should be taken one step further, and I think that we should have a line item in our budget that I think that the number was talked about during the campaign of $300,000 to $400,000 was going to estimate to be used for projects, and I think that line should be line item out in our budget of what we had a kind of a commitment of projects that we are hoping to fund, and then our council can make the decision that we don't have that money this year, and we are all accountable to not funding like that line, and we're going to use that in staffing, we're going to use that in other areas. But again, when I saw one of your goals were talking about the future ballot measures, I think we're going to have a hard time with the push that I hear is, where are the projects, where are the infrastructure, where are the paving, where are pothole replacements, when we aren't able to fund that. And so I think it is a little bit of a messaging game. But if it's clearly laid out that we as a council know what more or less the ballot measure sort of hope for and what promised, and that the ULA went up and things happen, that we're accountable as a council to then say, okay, we're obviously going to fund employees' positions or whatever that's going to be. But we can always look back in history and know that the Measure Y message was identified and continues to live on somewhere in the budget on what we're trying to fund. And so that when we do go back out, we're able to reflect back onto that, because I think the next time we go out, it'll probably have to be a 2/3 majority, and that's going to have to be directly for projects. And if we go to, simple majority, then people are going to have concerns about the money being in the general fund. So that'd just be one of my suggestions is how to identify, to try to counterbalance the perception in the community on how Measure Y money was used. And us as a council, since it's in general fund, we get to decide how that money is used. But at least if it's identified, the community has seen that we know what was somewhat promised in the ballot measure and in the campaign thing that I know I walked around, and I think other council members did, and really pushed for it. And I talked a lot about infrastructure and improvements and stuff, and we're just not there. So I'd like to hear what other people thought about that.
I think it goes back to the messaging and getting the information out there. So I think that is important.
The figure that I recall when we were initially proposing Measure Y was we were estimating 200,000 to 300,000 in surplus revenue. We can do that. I mean, if the council tells us, hey, look, let's do this, I think Susan's suggestion, we could take 200,000, as long as we understand the trade-off, that's sort of less of a cushion for mall redevelopment.
We get it.
Yeah, I don't have to say it again. We can show it that way and then make the decisions, because there's other cuts the council could talk about making to help bring us to balance. We've cut all the discretionary training within the city's budget. There's certainly options if this is sort of council direction.
I think maybe it's a little bit different what Councilmember Westman pointed. I think she was looking for the funding mechanism. I'm just saying in the future that as long as Measure Y lives for 10 years, if the number's 200 to 300, I just think that there's an identifying line that shows that, and then how it is funded, if it's by the First Trust or it's not funded or whatever, but it lives there, and so that it's not something that we can say, oh no, it's just dumped general fund and we forgot all the things that, I wrote out what our promises were, and we are in a position right now that we're unable to provide for those right now. That's what I was just trying to help, looking forward to our next measure that we're going to have to ask this community to support again.
I just had, my only comment was that, budget's tough all across the county and in different jurisdictions and in different organizations. And I congratulate us on a pretty balanced budget. At least we're not in a deficit. I think moving forward, I'd like to see us, and I know you and City Manager Goldstein and Director Hurley, you're doing a great job in outreaching and for economic development. I think we really need to focus on how we're going to bring more revenue into the city, economic development in terms of filling all our vacancies, having those conversations with TJ Maxx and Home Goods, and perhaps even recruiting like Rivian to make this city the EV center of the county. Just ideas on how we're going to bring in money. I know shuffling around numbers may give the perception to the public of some accountability. Ultimately, it's what our balance is, and whether using, dipping into that fun pocket of the UAL. I don't know if that's a good idea. Honestly, it's tricky.
Yeah, this isn't something we have to like decide on tonight.
An idea.
Yeah, I hear the idea. It does make me a little squeamish, but that's just, I understand what you're saying, but maybe, I guess, I have a question, Vice Mayor. So when you're talking about future budgets or line items, there would be, say, we'll take that 200,000 number, right? And there would be an actual project as the line item, like say it was paving Monterey or something, and then maybe that would cost 200,000, but we're foregoing that because there wasn't enough from Y to cover it. We're going to try to get to it.
And I was trying to prevent like even that additional work of what the project was just that, that there was a Measure Y promise allocation of $250,000 or something, and then sat there. And then if we said, oh, we can fund it, well, then we can look at using stuff
Okay.
time to figure out what that was. But
see.
just to try to identify so everybody understands what the ballot language in there that you can use it. So that was the only thing I
Okay.
was trying
No,
to.
I just needed a clarifying answer. Thank
And
you.
I think the council member Orbach's point of view, I think that's great to include that revenue, but I think we also need to look at ourselves where overall the economy is going. Are we looking at projections of people leaving the city? At the same time, because there are, different taxpayers that are at different levels that, are leaving. We have, 3 businesses left the village. I know it's a very small number, but we have 3 leave there. And if one of the bigger ones leave, we anticipated that other than our projections are always, Tesla could bring us 100 and everything. What happens when one of the top 10 leave? Are we looking at that? So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just another comment it made me think about this, Councilmember Jensen. I think there are certain, like only certain businesses can come into like the village, right? Is there any way we can expand that so we can have more different kinds of businesses coming in?
So maybe we want to. So I think Director Hurley can present when she's talking about her department goals. She can talk more about
I'll
that.
kick that down to Katie when it's her
And I
opportunity.
think actually there is a potential conversation about some zoning changes and where we want to make the zoning changes citywide. So with that,
Let's bounce back to Jim. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the pause. And then after Jim, we can ask other questions if we'd like, and then so on and so forth. Thank you.
So for Administrative Services Department accomplishments this fiscal year, continued the TOT vacation rental audit and enforcement program. We implemented a new bail schedule or updated bail schedule. It was new. We revamped the whole thing. Implemented the transition of IT to a contract service and increased the efficiently and streamlined HR as part of the restructuring of pulling HR also into the Admin Services Department. As far as our goals for this coming fiscal year, proposed goals, I'd like to digitize and streamline the HR process. It's a very manual and old process, and continue to improve city financial transparency. There was, I had in the original budget that I submitted, I had $20,000 set aside for looking at software that brings our fiscal transparency portal back. I had cut that out in our round of department level cuts to get balanced. It came up again at the FAC, so I'm going to try to add that back in for the round 2. As long as I can stay balanced, I'll look for another place to come up with funding for that. On the economic opportunities, developing a long-term financial plan for Measure Y. I think I have listening to this conversation, I think I have some ideas that might help kind of us get to where I think we want to go. Identifying future revenue opportunities and addressing increasing costs. And as a cost-cutting measure, we're bringing the TOT auditing back in-house, so that'll be a savings of about $19,000 by bringing that back in and doing those services with existing staff. And I will pass it off to Chief Ryan.
Any questions
Oh,
for
question.
Jim?
Yeah.
Went too fast again.
I'm talking too much. But anyway, I just wanted to reiterate at our FAC meeting last night, one of the topics that came up was the idea that the city needs to have sort of a 5-year budget plan. We may not have it this year, but ongoing in future budgets. And I think the FAC was very enthusiastic about Jim trying to put back the $20,000 into his budget, because without that, doing that kind of work is much more cumbersome. And we think it's important to have it ongoing in the future, and that's something everyone seemed to be in favor of last night. Thank you.
Yeah, that chunk of change was, it's a software that you have used before.
We had a version of it before the pandemic that was just the fiscal transparency. It was very early when that stuff started coming out. Now the software has evolved. The fiscal transparency stuff is still there and improved, but they also do operating budgets. They do CIP budgets. There's modules for purchasing. Scotts Valley uses OpenGov, and they were one of their guinea pigs. So they have pretty much every module. They have mixed feelings on it. There's, I think, 2 other companies that do the same thing. But yeah, every other agency in this county, I think, is using that type of software. So when you look at their web pages and their budgets and compare them to ours, we look kind of outdated.
That was my question. So it would be something that's a little bit more user-friendly for the public. And yeah, so that's kind of where that was coming from. Maybe less intensive for our staff too. So that wouldn't be terrible. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, I skipped over you.
I would just echo agreement with Councilmember Councilmember Westman and Mayor Morgan that this discretionary spending of $20,000 is important, I think, for all of us, and to increase transparency to our community so they can follow our finances. I think it's a great idea. Put it back in.
What's, just so we all understand, what's the process used today?
It's all manual. We don't have, I mean, it's a PDF, it's static. I don't have links. It's very old and outdated.
So more opportunity for,
It's a spreadsheet, yeah.
yeah, so you're just carrying, and more opportunity of carrying over things, cells and everything. So this will be very much more automated. Perfect, thanks.
And a question for Jim. How do we get back to the reserves that we had just a few years ago? And if we do get money back from FEMA and ROES, will that go into the reserves or just the general fund?
So a little bit of the history of the reserves is the reason that they're in the condition that they are in is because we spent the money that we would normally put to replenish reserves on the wharf, waiting for the reimbursement. Between the two, I want to say they're 540, no, 920 or 920 or 940,000 between a contingency and reserve, underfunded. The reimbursement coming from FEMA, if we get it all, is 969. So council could direct us to put, replenish the reserves up to the target levels, and then whatever is left could go to one-time stuff. Yes.
A follow-up question.
Go ahead.
A follow-up question, Jim. When I met with you in your office last week, which I appreciate your time, was could you mind just taking us back for a little bit on, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, when we go back and look at, budgets and stuff, and we see that, we're able to pay for the flume, and we bought a $350,000 tractor, and we all this. I think we paid off the parking lot. We put $500,000 into our PERS trust fund, and then we look at where we are today. You did a good job of kind of explaining to me. I think it might be good for everybody to hear and the community here. Why are we not at that point today? And what has happened? Is it all PERS, or what has happened to how Measure F has transitioned to Measure Y, and why we don't have those extra funds these days?
So with Measure F, we were tracking Measure F to the wharf project up until about the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, we used Measure F money to fund police officers because we didn't want to lay off police officers because they still had to work. Once the pandemic was over, the first year out of the pandemic, we received American Rescue Plan money that I could not use for capital. So I returned Measure F to the wharf, and then was using the American Rescue Plan money for public safety and whatever else we needed. As the UAL kept going up, Measure F was slowly getting absorbed, the remaining amount, into operations. And then once we got the grant for the wharf, by the time we got that grant in December of 22, December of 22, Measure F was pretty much going all to operations by that point. But it was fine because we had the grant, and Measure F was supposed to do the things that pretty much did the things it was supposed to do it by that point, I believe. Wharf, flume, jetty, loader, and public safety.
I think the big picture answer to that question is two-part, is UAL, and sales tax hasn't kept up with inflation. So, you know, I ran, and certainly the storm damage took down the reserves. But the reason why sort of things are as tight as they are, where 10 years ago, we would end every year with a fiscal surplus and be able to do that, is just the average growth, I think, in sales tax over the last 15 years is like a couple percent. And our costs grow at 4 to 5%. And PERS grows a lot faster than that. So that's been the challenge. Big picture, when you look at property tax, actually the point that Jim made earlier about how property tax is growing as a percentage of our overall revenue, that's a symptom of that problem. If we were a property tax rich city and property tax 10 years, 20 years ago was the majority of our revenue, we would be in a very different position because that has grown at about 6.5% a year over the last 15 years. So I think the big picture answer is sales tax hasn't kept up with inflation and UAL.
Thank you.
So I just had one quick question because I forget that personnel's now in your department. And we have a whole list of MOUs that need to be renegotiated next year because they all expire in June of 27. And currently we have $22,000 in the city attorney's budget, which I understand is where the money goes to hire someone to do negotiations and work with that. And I just wanted to make certain that that number is adequate because it's not significantly more than we had this year. So if you could just, you don't have to give me an answer right now, check and make certain that that number is adequate to cover those costs next year.
So that'll be a decision for the council to make, is who do they want to hire it for a negotiator. And there's different options. You can hire an attorney negotiator. You can hire, someone who's not an attorney. The 22,000 we feel like is a good placeholder, but it will be a decision for the council to make in January of 27 as they sort of decide on which negotiating team they want to use.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to PD.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. So first of all, I received a text to clear our curiosity from Scotts Valley. They are in their council meeting right now as well, and the chief stated that they did receive $680,000 one-time funding from Panetta's office for radio infrastructure, and they are participating in Ring. So it's accurate, and we'll be facing some of those challenges too with needing to update radio. So they did get the $680,000 funding.
Not dispatch for radio?
Correct. It's for infrastructure, for their dispatch infrastructure, because they do their own. And they can use some of that for equipment, the radios.
I'm sorry. So you think that will be offsetting some of their Ring costs?
Right. They'll be able to use it for their own infrastructure, which leads me, as I'm hearing the discussion, I'm adding to my goals.
Call Jimmy?
Yes. That's part one of that.
Thank you
Right.
for that. Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry, to clarify. So, because remind me, the Ring, we rent those, right? So we don't own the rights to them, or?
No. So, okay.
sorry.
We have our own radios, and we own the radios.
Yeah.
The proposed infrastructure we would share. We have our own infrastructure right now, and that we've been told is not going to be as useful moving forward with this overall project. The radios themselves, they're ours. They belong, and so upgrades, we're responsible for the upgrades with them, and each individual radio is several $1,000s.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. Okay.
There's one other nuance here is that the CAD systems, so these are the computer-aided dispatching systems that are at the 911 center and at the Scotts Valley dispatch center, those also need to be upgraded as well. So Scotts Valley has a lot more infrastructure than we do to make the ring transition, if that makes sense.
Okay, so our accomplishments, converting the CSO or community service officer position to the multi-service officer, changing some of that job descriptions. You remember we previously went through that exercise. We are fully staffed with 3 full-time parking enforcement officers, and I think as we move on into goals and looking at numbers, staffing is directly related to productivity. So we've also implemented the Axon interview system, which has been working fantastically. And then our e-bike safety collaboration with New Brighton Middle School, launching the bicycle registration program with the tamper-proof stickers. And that's also, so we've started that pilot program as well. Pay station replacement program, where we've replaced the pay stations over time, and things seem to be moving along fairly well as the Park Mobile, encouraging our visitors to pay with the app. And then e-citation technology really helps us on the back end with processing citations, both traffic and parking related. So moving forward into this next year, we are looking forward to bringing back the emergency operations plan that we had set aside some funding to work with Jim Frawley and have him update that plan for us and getting that published on our website. And we're in the middle of preparing a anti-human trafficking ordinance that we're also looking forward to introducing to council. And implementing with our e-citations and being able to track data more closely at directed traffic enforcement operations. So looking at where data is showing that we need to put our attention and using that data to direct where we go with our enforcement. And then continuing our e-bike safety program. Whoa. And then enhancing community engagement through our neighborhood watch program that is ongoing, but it also can use us reaching back out to the community to focus on groups that maybe aren't knowledgeable of neighborhood watch, and really focusing on fraud education. We've really seen an uptick. If anyone follows the sheriff's office social media, they've done some posts that we've also partnered with to really reach out to that population that's vulnerable to fraud. And I'm also beginning the recruitment for the Chiefs Advisory Committee. So now with the launch of the new website, getting the forums and out there so the community, they're accessible to community, and grant opportunities. We've submitted, I'm really proud of the team and what we've been able to submit for grants. We're in a holding pattern to find out if we receive the pretty large cannabis grant for over $200,000 that will help us to focus towards more traffic safety. We have a current traffic safety grant for about $21,000, and also our ongoing ABC grant that we submit for every year that's around $35,000. And our records management system, we've been talking about this for about over 8 years, and it's a collaboration between the entire county moving to one records management system. So we're finally in the phases of getting into a contract with Tyler Tech and moving forward with the build out process. So it's exciting for us from an information sharing standpoint. Any questions?
Great. Councilmember Clark, any questions for the chief? Councilmember Rohrbach?
I just want to thank you for working on the human trafficking ordinance. I think it's important. when we had our presenters come and talk about it. I also looked at, and you pointed me to the county, oh my God, the report where there are multiple jurisdictions within this county who have similar ordinances that we should also adopt. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Any questions?
I just have one quick question. It was mentioned last night that our JPA contract for the 911 system is actually going to go down about $50,000 from the number that was in the budget, and I just wanted to verify that's correct.
That is correct. I believe it's about $54,000, yes.
And do you have any comment about freezing the one position in your department for the multi-service community officer MSO position? Because yours is the only department where it looks like we're freezing a position, and I just wanted to give you a chance to comment on it.
I do have comments about that. Thank you for asking. Well, as I stated earlier when I was talking about our goals, even if we just look at our parking enforcement team, it's fully staffed and they are working really hard and our numbers are climbing, our revenue's climbing, and so productivity is directly related to staffing. And even this council's been with us through some staffing challenges as we've had to backfill for police officer positions, and it makes it's hard to focus on the needs of the community when we want to do directed enforcement. So in order to, multi-service officers are also able to do parking enforcement, traffic enforcement, vehicle abatement, the projects that we've committed to the community surrounding school safety. So yes, I think I would be remiss to say that I wasn't really attached to being fully staffed and whole so that we can produce what we've committed to. So that's where it stands. However, I understand the overall budget. So there is that team player part of it.
So one of the items that we did discuss last night is we have our OPEB trust fund. And that fund is set up to pay for retirees' health cost. And right now we spend about $38,000 a year making that payment, and there's almost $1 million in that fund. And not only do we spend the $38,000 making the payment, for years we've been putting like $67,000 into that fund every year. And if you look at the retirement costs that this fund pays for, they were like $121 a month years ago, and they've gone up to $160 a month. So even if you doubled the number of retirees that the city was paying this fund for, there's money there to go on for the next 20, 25 years. And so I think that's a place where the city should look at, first of all, paying the $38,000 out of that fund and not putting the $68,000 back into it, which generates almost $100,000, I think $105,000. And if we could do something like that, it would make it possible to not have to cut that particular position, which is or freeze that position, which is the only position that we're talking about freezing. So I think that's something that we ought to look into as a way to make certain that we can fully staff our police department. I agree. I think that that kind of officer is very versatile and can fill into a lot of places where someone happens to be sick, has an accident, is out. We're banking a lot on parking citation revenue going way up. And that only goes way up if there's definitely 3 full-time people working that system. So I would like us to look into that option.
Yeah, so I had many questions about the MSO position, and thank you for your candid response regarding, last year we talked about police overtime, and I heard many times is because, if we had a community service officer filled, they could backfill. I know they're not the same position, but they could backfill and fill in for if there was an accident, a police officer could leave the scene and maybe they could, stand by and wait for a tow truck. And so I heard that that was a strong thing on trying to, how that was going to help offset our overtime. And so now I look at that as one of the suggestions. I say, well, then we're going to come back to an overtime issue, and then we'll be coming back to your department, which I think I did as a council member. I think our council looked at it very strongly. First reaction was, why is overtime so high? And it's because you don't have staff. So in other departments, maybe they don't have staff, so they might contract out more services. And so we aren't looking at them the same way. So I'm strongly opposed to that, having the MSO position not filled from those standpoints. And then we talked about, like Councilmember Weston said, around parking. What if you have a parking attendant who's off on vacation? And it's not just a position I don't think you can just call in a sub for and backfill. So now we're going to be losing revenue. So those are direct correlations, I think, to those. And so I'm, like I said, I'll say it one more time. I'm strongly opposed to that even being on the table, and we need to challenge ourselves to find other money. I think Councilmember Westman has a great thing there. I think our staff could probably look forward to how we can fund that. But also, if there wasn't money, we need to figure out another place in our budget to find that. One thing we just talked about was parking, and I didn't see that really highlighted in here. I don't know if it's highlighted in another slide, but if we could talk, can we talk about parking for a minute? Is parking in here, or is parking?
There is some slides later that talk about the key discussion points, and parking is on there, yeah.
Maybe, Mike, could I just talk a little bit about parking around the number of $850,000? Is that okay, or do you want to hold on that? Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Just around the $850,000. I've been told, we had years that we were at $500,000 in parking revenue, and now tickets are doubled. But I just did some quick math, and I just took, you have $850,000 a year, and if we got 100% of the tickets, which I don't think we get 100% of the funding, is that correct? We have to pay a fee for at $68 a ticket. That means there's 12,500 tickets a year, and if you take that by 365 days, so that's never closing off parking in the village. There's no art and wine loss. There's absolutely zero losses. That means you're writing 34 and a half tickets a day. And if you have two people working 10 hours a day, you're writing about 2 tickets an hour continuously with no variable. To me, looking at those numbers, I just think that's a lot to put on our police department to see that that's going to be the expectation. And again, I go back to, I might be guilty of it too. We look at the police department balancing the budget on a lot of these items because you have the opportunity to generate the revenue. Then I think we need to make sure we generate the support and to make sure that you have that. And then, but I'd be open to the discussion on how, is the $850,000 a realistic number with looking at just how I broke that down, or are we balancing our budget to say we could get $850,000 and we might miss it? And that's what my concern is.
So Jim and I are, like we said, we historically were between high 475, 525, and so this is less than a doubling. Your numbers are pretty much our ballpark, I think, right in terms of the tickets per day. I'll tell you, last month we averaged 44 a day, so over that threshold, and the previous month we did as well. So the new team has been in place now, fully active for 2 months, and so far they're validating the assumption that they probably will blow past that number, assuming no injuries and we stay on track. So from my standpoint, I think that number is good. That number is solid.
But with that number, we're thinking it's 365 days of parking. So I think one thing we need to look at, we take the village and we have free parking for a month, right? And so that number is going to come down. And then, you know, we have Art and Wine, and we have all these other things. I was just in 365 just to try to make sure we're get to a real number and not trying to pull out and say the tickets are 86 and really, 68 and we're really getting 60. And I was just trying to be raw numbers. And again, I'd much rather be conservative and have a number that's obtainable for parking because, no offense, we haven't met it in the last couple of years. And then we have to come back mid-year, and our mid-year seems like it's in late February, and then it's a little bit late to adjust it. So, if you ever feels that number's strong, then that's what we should go with. But I just have a lot of concerns, and just the last thing was just about the MSO position. I do have a couple of follow-up questions. Under the emergency plan update, didn't we just update our plan? So is this another update to our plan?
No, what we did is we agreed to work with Jim Frawley to update the entire emergency operation plan and to set aside some funding for that. And so that has been in process. And now we are, wanting to bring that completed project back so that we could publish it. So
we have emergency plan today. This is an update for
correct.
it. So
Correct.
we're compliant with having one. This is an update. And then you said funding. Is there money budgeted for that?
We did. We already did that. It's already been paid for. Now it's just producing the updated plan because
That
it
was
hasn't been
carryover from
updated.
last year.
I'm sorry?
That was a carryover from last year.
Correct.
Funding.
That's correct.
And then just I see one last thing that under one of your goals was the record management system that I've seen personally your staff struggle with trying to pull data. And it seems like that's something as much as we looked at the finance software being correct and being able to, is there, with that record management system being an 8-year program or project and everything, are we building a budget in for that right now when that does come online, or what do we have any anticipated costs around that?
So those costs we pay for with our 911 bill. And so that is part of the increase that you're seeing with 911. Part of the reason why we had the decrease was we were able to use some fund balance to bridge over a 3-year period as the phase-in for the RMS system came in play. So that was part of the decrease. But we pay for it through the JPA. So the increases you're seeing in the JPA costs, those are sort of mostly being driven by the RMS cost because it is an expensive system.
Okay, so that will just be rolled up in that large number. We wouldn't have to have a line item for that. I thought I understood that last year there was going to be a major cost to the city of doing that switch over, and then we abandoned it. And we abandoned the process where we were going to switch a different direction.
Yeah, it's a very long process. I think Chief Ryan's correct. We've been talking about upgrading that RMS in this county for maybe a decade, and we were well down the path with a different vendor, and we pulled the plug about 3 years ago, and we're now at the point where we're entering a contract with Tyler Tech and beginning implementation this next year. So it's been a long process, but the costs are through the JPA and through the cost-sharing formula at the JPA.
Perfect. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
So I just would I'm comfortable with the parking number, but the reason I'm comfortable with it is that's a number we know month by month. I mean, what happened last month, what happened. So I think that we're in a place where if that number starts to get off, we don't have to wait till a mid-year budget update in February to get it. It seems like, we could task staff with saying, if it's off by, 15% each 1 month, come back and let the council know that we might have to make some sort of adjustments there. But that's not like sales tax where we have to wait on it. We'll know month by month.
Can I make a quick comment about the parking enforcement number as well? The staffing, keeping our parking enforcement team as strictly parking enforcement is another direct correlation to their productivity. If when we talked about the MSOs, if we're pulling them to do other things, then parking becomes a secondary or a third part of their tasks during their shift. That's just how we have to triage things. So the fact that what you're seeing right now is with the way that we're tracking, those three employees are parking enforcement only and not taken for any other assignment.
And if I could just make a couple points, and please, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. Of course, we're looking at the village and the income from the village parking spaces and tickets there, but there are other areas that we patrol and ticket on a pretty regular basis outside of the village proper. So on those off days that maybe the parking is free or the village is closed, there's other opportunities for tickets to be written and revenue essentially generated.
Correct.
And sorry, they're the same amount, right? Say it was a 72-hour
Correct.
violation. It's the same $68. Okay. So I just want to like put that out there too. Like there's these other variables that we can kind of lean on when, because I don't want to take everything away just from the village too. Like, oh, we're closed for a day and it's just going to ruin the whole 850. Like I don't want to look at it that way because I think, I do think it's doable, but I also am interested in trying to figure out if there's a way that we can increase the revenue if we do bring somebody else on in other budgeting ways. So I'm all for that. And I got a comment today from a community member who got a ticket. So go us. But she also was encouraging us to put a QR code onto the ticket where that blank white space is so that they could easily pay. So that's just an idea to throw out there. I don't know if that would help or hurt or even be possible, but just a thought. Any other
Just to follow up
comments?
on your
Yeah.
comment regarding the village, I was talking to the city manager about like what the cost is to the city to have the village offline for the holiday season. And it's about, I think we threw out about $100,000. And so when we look at a month free parking in the village, $100,000, and we're looking at $100,000 for an MSO. I mean, so I think that's why I was bringing up the village. It has so much drive into that. And then I also think when we look at that from parking, we should look at how many parking passes are being issued. And I think we're issuing over 1,000 parking passes free a year now. You know, with between junior guards and employee parking and all this other stuff. So I just think overall, but going back to my first comment, you know, at $100,000, if we're in tight budget constraints, maybe that's a conversation we all need to have.
Can I ask more about, I'm not familiar with this, the OPBE trust fund. Can you talk more about that? That Councilmember brought up. Councilmember
So
Westman brought up.
I'm honestly a little bit embarrassed that Susan's suggesting this because Jim and I talked about it probably last year around this time, maybe a little bit afterwards, and we had the exact same idea. And honestly, it slipped kind of as we were sort of hitting this budget cycle because so basically what this is it's a way. 115 trusts are a way to pre-fund both your retiree health obligations and your retiree pension obligations, and it lets the city invest in certain types of instruments that we normally wouldn't be able to. That's a coded way of saying we can invest in the stock market. Normally, cities don't do that. You just buy T-bills. So because these are long-term investments, we have them in what are called 115 trusts, and we can get higher rates of return, more like market rates of return. We've been putting money in the OPEB trust for a number of years, and Councilmember Westman is correct. It's $60,000 a year, and it's determined based on this actuarial assumption. And if you put the money into the account, then the actuaries go and say, you therefore are pre-funding it, so we're going to assume a different discount rate. So your long-term liability is, only $1 million versus $3 million. There's another rule of thumb, though, and I think many retirees know this, that if you have $1 million and you count on $40,000 a year income out of it, you should be all right. 4% a year. Pretty conservative. You should be all right. We're at that point right now in the OPEB trust where we could pull 4% a year out and pay our retiree benefits. It will be a hit on our audited financials. It'll show up as our net position will drop because the actuary will say, you're not contributing money anymore because they have this weird formula. But it doesn't change our cash position. In fact, it helps our cash position, and it does free up about $100,000 a year. So it is something we talked about previously proposing, and honestly, it was kind of just forgot. So I think it's definitely worth considering.
And so, I mean, I know I asked you last night, but basically the penalty is that our score goes down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's not like a,
And this is routinely done in cities. I think that some of the cities in our own county are looking at doing these kinds of things in these tough budget times, and the penalty is insignificant.
To follow up on that account, so that's only used for retirees' benefits, right?
Yeah, it's only for retiree health. Retiree healthcare. Yeah, Councilmember Westman is correct. And just so that the record is clear, we don't offer full retiree health. We offer the minimum allowed by law, which is about $160 a retiree per month. And so that's totals out just under, I think, $40,000 a year is the checks that we write. And so we could use the $1 million we have set aside to pay that. I think it's a good idea.
So it's capped at 161, no matter who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you numbers. I did a bunch of research on
I
it.
guess
They just call it the PEMCA minimum payment, and it goes up about $3 a year.
Right.
So I think when they first came out with PEPRA, it was around in the 120s or 130s, and it's taken a decade to get up to $160.
And anyone who retires with a PERS retirement from the city of Capitola is eligible to purchase health insurance through PERS. And the city's obligation is that the city will pay, right now, the rate is $160 a month toward that health benefit. And it doesn't matter if you retire from Capitola, you retire from the city of Belmont, which I did, the number is the same, it's set by the state. And there's no expectation that it will go up more than a couple dollars a year every year.
my follow-up to that was sometimes you see a golden handshake deal get offered by cities and stuff. And if golden handshake was, oh, you have benefits paid out until your Medicare, could that account be used for that to pay that out, or is it restricted to the same treatment across the whole board?
I'm going to guess that it couldn't be used for like a golden handshake lump sum. It could be used for the insurance healthcare premiums. So you could commit to saying we're going to pay either the PEMCA minimum or the full premium, but you couldn't give like a golden handshake lump sum.
So if there was a golden handshake deal that was offered, it could then be and say, oh, we'll pay this person out because they're taking the deal, and we'll pay them out $1,000 a month. That account could be used for that.
I would have to confirm it.
I just want to make sure that there's fair treatment.
I don't think that account actually can be used for that. I think you're going to find the way it's set up, because it's related to PERS, it's how this PERS account.
What it could be used for is the city could say, we're going to pay more than the PEMCA minimum for 20-year employees, 30-year employees. And then you could use the OPEB for that. But that would be a negotiation for an MOU.
That would have to come back to.
so I think we're interested in more information coming back to us about that. That'd be great. Any other questions for this section? All right. Ms. Khan, you're up. Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. This is going to be relatively brief in comparison to 2 weeks from now when we're talking about every capital project we have. But for the highlights for this past fiscal year, we will have completed the Parker Brisbane Mansion, of which we had our opening a couple weeks ago, and then our opening about a month or so of our Jade Street project. So that is the community center renovation, the Treasure Cove playground, and then the associated restroom renovations, which together is about a $10.3 million project. So we're very excited to have that completed at the end of this fiscal year. By the end of this fiscal year, we will also have substantially completed the 41st Multimodal Improvements Project. We are looking to get that construction started at the end of this month. And then, as always, delivering our core services with our Public Works crew, looking for funding opportunities and supporting our many year-round public events. So for city goals for Public Works Department for this coming fiscal year. We're looking to advance some of our safety projects identified in our local road safety plan, which hopefully we'll be adopting next week during our regular meeting, and advancing our active transportation plan planning, and then doing projects out, advancing projects out of that effort. Under sustainable infrastructure, we have many projects in the queue, including the Cliff Drive Resiliency, Esplanade Park, and Stockton Avenue Bridge projects that we will be advancing this year. I don't expect any of those to be fully completed within next fiscal year, and then delivering on our annual pavement maintenance program. And last but not least, we recently started public outreach on one of the council goals from this past fiscal year, or this current fiscal year, about the Monterey Park play space. I believe you got a Friday update that we sent out postcards to the surrounding neighborhood and put out in our social media a brief survey, just kind of taking the temperature of what is possible in that space. Like I said, the next budget meeting, we'll be talking about the CIP in depth and those budgets, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Westman, any questions?
I have one. So, and I don't know if this is really Public Works. We're doing this a little differently. But on page 15 of the budget, we have an equipment replacement fund. And I think it involves police, Public Works. I mean, it's big equipment. And the page lists that we're going to spend $197,000 in equipment replacement. And I know what 100,000 of that's indicated to be, and that is one police car and one gym car, though I'm not certain what a gym car is. I assume it's like a golf cart or something like that. So my question was, what other big equipment are we going to buy with our $97,000?
I think that is a carryover number, because the numbers that I have for the police car and the gym car, I think totaled 100,000. So
Right,
the additional 100 would just go into the equipment ISF. We picked 200,000 based on our depreciation. So even if we weren't buying a vehicle, we would recommend putting 200,000 into the equipment ISF just to cover the depreciation. So the 197 will get updated. It'll be 125 in the second draft.
So we have extra money.
No.
I'm looking for money.
No. So what we try to do is some years we need one police car, some years we need two police cars. So we need 1.5 a year. So we try to put 1.5 police cars worth of money in the ISF every year. And so this year it's 1, and we're putting in a little bit more. So next year it can be 2, or a Public Works truck. And so it's based on depreciation, not the actual money in, money out.
Okay, I'm still a little confused about that when you look at the fleet fund and you look at the fleet's different.
That's the main.
Fleet is the auto shop and the maintenance where the mechanic works up at the corp yard. The
Okay.
equipment fund is just a fund that we use only for purchasing vehicles and equipment,
Okay,
an internal service fund.
okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, just in talking, can you, I guess, maybe take us a little further down the road on some of the pavement improvement projects that we'll be doing this year, in line with our PCI report, that we have and everything? Do we have an idea what that money looks like we're going to have for that and how that is going to be allocated?
Yes, so the money that we allocate towards that project every year is the combination of the RMRA or SB1 funds, and then also our Measure D funds. So I don't have that number off the top of my head, but those two restricted funds in the budget. No, that's with the gas tax. So it's less than that. And those are the numbers that we assumed in our 5-year pavement management program. So the 2 sets of projects that are left for the next 2 years of our 5-year program are some streets in the village, and then also some neighborhood streets, I believe in the Cliffwood Heights neighborhood. We're evaluating right now which would be the best ones to do this year, considering some of the other utility projects that are happening around town. And so that's still somewhat to be determined. But the value of that project, I believe, is about $600,000, but I would have to ask Jim to quick math.
Yep. I know there'll be a time that you bring back that, but we'll look at that, what that report and those suggested streets are, and then what their PCI index rating is. Is that correct?
Correct. So that will come to an item for city council to approve. Each year, we have to report to the state and also to the RTC about what we intend, which streets specifically we intend on spending that money on this year. And so that would be when the council would review those streets, is when we bring those resolutions to also provide to the state.
And two follow-up questions. Do we know last time the city's put any general fund money towards any paving or any paving improvements in the city outside of like Measure D or outside funds?
So I would have to look back on that. I know the last 3 or so pavement projects have also had grant funds associated with them, but general funds, I'm not aware of any projects since I've been here that we've put just general fund towards.
And I'll just have to give my pitch early again for the Raposa Road project. That was, just to give council an update, that road was scheduled to be done 3 years ago. Council at that time, it was supposed to be Raposa and then Famar. Council at that meeting made a decision to flip the two. And so they did Famar, and Raposa's never gone back to. So I'm just going to be early in asking DeVos to, if we could, keep our commitment on that street, who they thought was going to get paved and how it flipped. And I know we did some minor repair work this year, but again, just as we can look at that. So I know that's a little bit off topic, but advocating for the Raposa people. That's all I have. Thank you.
Question for you, Jessica. I'm familiar with the active transportation plan, but what is our local safety plan with the local roadway safety plan?
Sure. So the local road safety plan came to council maybe 4 or so regular meetings ago for the draft for you all to review. That is that plan that was all data driven. So it's all serious injury and then fatality crashes, and using that data to determine where we should be doing very strictly safety improvements throughout the city. So that will be coming back for adoption next week. There is a lot of grant fund that makes us eligible for a lot of federal grant funding. So that's why we did that specifically outside of the active transportation plan. It's also, again, just a very specific metric that you're analyzing with that set of data.
Great, thank you.
Just a question, I guess, to the city manager. When you say you're looking at future ballot initiatives or something, would something you be looking at, like potentially, could there be something for our road conditions or something? Are those things that you're evaluating at looking at? I mean, I was wondering if you want to expand on what your goal is.
So candidly, that was a carryover from a prior year. I don't.
We still like it.
You still like it, okay. Well, we can talk more about it. I think at this phase, I don't know that we were going to be proposing. I mean, the time to have the conversation is now, because if we want to put a measure on the ballot, we have to do it by July.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking, I was just thinking long term down the line are these things that you're looking forward at and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
would paving be one of those? And then a follow up to that, like looking at our PCI report, that's going to be due. I think we might have another year until that gets reevaluated again. And I was just trying to understand what your vision was for the future.
Yeah, so we've talked about a number of different taxes over time, or increases. One of the ones that some other peer jurisdictions have done is the business license modernization tax. That's something, I don't think we've touched our business license fees in the history of the city, maybe, I'm not sure. Scotts Valley did it, and Los Gatos did it relatively recently. So that's something that we have been tracking. We have definitely looked into, the former public works director and I were looking into at one point what it would take to upgrade every street in the city, get every street in the city up to sort of good standards, and then just look at the ongoing road taxes to just do slurry seals. And back then, I think the cost to do that was like $30 to $40 million. So it's going to be hard to imagine finding a tax that generates that kind of money. But obviously, in the long term, you've seen the reports. We need something like $2 million a year to maintain or improve our PCI, and we put in 700K, maybe more with grants. Maybe we're averaging $1 million, $1.1 million. So finding that source in the long term is certainly should be a goal for all of us.
Great. Sorry. Thank you. And we have Ms. Herlihy.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. So just to go over our recent past accomplishments of 2026. This last year, we expanded our department to include economic development, so that's been exciting and fun. We've adopted the mall objective standards towards redevelopment of the Capitola Mall. We also issued the certificate of occupancy for the Bluffs at 4401 Capitola Road, a 36-unit, 100% affordable project. We participate in going after the grant money for CDBG, and last year we received another $3.3 million towards the Treasure Cove project for the playground there. And then we put a lot of focus on the 41st Avenue corridor and later added on Claire's and Capitola Road. That will be coming to you at the end of the month. We're going to Planning Commission tomorrow night to give an overview on that project. Another project that we just checked the box on is the Capitola Wharf Master Plan. We're now calling it the Conceptual Capitola Wharf Master Plan. And we're getting the RFP out with the final edits and soliciting proposals for development. I will say I spent a lot of time calling restaurants yesterday along wharfs all over California to get emails to get that out to them. We also executed a housing rehabilitation program. And this is a great project. It's in partnership with Habitat for Humanity. They're giving free labor, and we provided funds towards that. So far, we've had 7 households participate. We have funding for more households, so we'll probably do another renoticing. 2 projects have been completed so far, and that's to do improve our inclusionary housing within the city. And also our day-to-day operations of 80 planning applications and 407 building permits. So next slide, please. So what are our goals moving forward? One goal is to issue the building permit for the 38th Avenue project, which has 52 affordable units on it. We'll know next week whether or not they get this award. So May 12th is the date of the big news. So I'm hoping to send out a good email that day. We're working on launching our down payment assistant program. So we're working closely with our city attorney on that. And then we plan on updating our Nexus study for rental housing in Capitola. Economic opportunities and infrastructure. We'll continue to work with large property owners and businesses throughout Capitola. Some I've called out in here, the Capitola Mall, Tesla, Village Hotel site, and the Grimes property towards redevelopment. We're also we'll update our community benefits code. This is something that I'm actively working on right now, and we'll push forward through the new year, of building in hotel incentives. So not just at the mall, but down 41st Avenue and at our entryway off Bay Avenue, as well as starting to think about economic incentives for businesses that have existing commercial to bring in net new commercial onto their site. So similar to what we did at the mall. And then towards retail growth and also to accommodate housing within those updates. The 41st Avenue corridor study, we're just about to complete that in the next month or so. We don't have the cost of these improvements yet. That is part of the deliverables, so we'll be getting those. Once we have the cost of those deliverables, I'll be going out and finding out the cost associated with an impact fee study tied to the 41st Corridor, Claire's, and Capitola Road. So that's not yet budgeted in our budget, but I'll also be looking at our special revenue funds and see if there's any way that any of those special revenue funds could be applied to this project, or grant money for grant opportunities. And then for healthy families, community, and environment, we have the Capitola Wharf Master Plan funding opportunity. So just moving forward, trying to find that public-private partnership. And then also moving forward with hopefully another shovel-ready CDBG project. I did want to spend a little more time on this to inform you that every time a new NOFA comes out for CDBG, kind of the rules change and we don't know what to expect. This year, they published a document letting us know what to expect the last round and then these next 2 rounds. And in the next 2 rounds, they're going to increase the money to $5 million. They're going to go to the old selection process. You have to have a shovel-ready project. And it's pretty a competitive project, but if you have all your ducks aligned, you've got a better likelihood of getting that grant. And that's what, like at Jade Street, the 2 instances there, we were ready to go and got those grants. So if we could go to the next slide. Capitola used to be a citywide, 51% of our population was low mod individuals, so we qualified citywide for projects. More recently, we no longer meet that qualification, so there's specific blocks within Capitola that we qualify for CDBG grants. So on this slide, where you see the word yes, those neighborhoods qualify for CDBG grant projects. And where you see no, that means they do not. The one block that you see no but close, it means they're really close in that block towards the 51% requirement. And so if there were a project that were combined with, that actually went over the boundary into a yes, you could also include that neighborhood in a project. So this is the time to start thinking about these. This is not funding we have, it's not guaranteed. It's a lot of funding though, it's $5 million. So in those areas, just start thinking about those projects that could happen in Capitola. The trick here is applications will be due usually like October, November, and we have to have a shovel-ready project, which means it has to be to that point to show that we can move forward with a contractor. So that's food for thought, and our other accomplishments were on the previous slides and goals. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Clark?
Yeah, question, why did we lose out on some areas for the CDBG grants? Why did it change?
Why what? I'm sorry. Oh, those areas,
Areas.
because the incomes went beyond before they had the populations in those blocks. There was more than 51% that were lower mod income. So because the income levels are too high in those blocks, we no longer can apply there. And more accurately, before it applied citywide, and at citywide, our average was greater than 51% low mod. So once we dropped below that 51% citywide, we had to start looking at the individual blocks, low and moderate income averages.
Some areas don't.
And it's money
some
that
areas
comes
don't look
down.
accurate, but yeah,
Yeah, it comes down from the federal government, and so it's just the rules tied to CDBG.
thank you.
I'll second that. The map doesn't sort of intuitively line up with where you think of, but it's the data. It's the data that come from the federal government, from the census, about what our income levels by block group. And so we used to be more than 51% citywide, which meant anywhere in the city we could do it. And then we lost that designation 4 years ago,
I think so, yeah.
something like that. And so now we have to focus in on the specific block groups.
So Katie, you mentioned that, so my question is, Bay Ave corridor is a big project that we're looking for funding for. And given that is right along the edge of one of the lines, how does that work in terms of whether that project would qualify or not?
So that project would qualify because on the north side towards the highway, you have two neighborhoods that qualify. On the south side, the number is so close that we've actually have run the math with the consultant that if we were to combine that south side that says no, but close, with a north side project, so that if it's a project that connects between both a non-qualifying and a qualifying, and averages out, it can be brought in.
Wait, that north side looks like it's not in the yes, but in the no, but close.
But because there's enough of a tie-in to the yes, we could average those two. So it's the area like northeast of Capitola Ave.
And how close are we to shovel ready for Bay Ave?
So we would have to start, I don't know how close we are to shovel ready on Bay Ave. I don't think we're very close. There's a update coming to you at the next meeting.
The next meeting you'll be talking about, we'll be bringing the draft Bay Avenue corridor plan. So we'll be getting feedback from council at that point. And then we'll be talking about CIP projects on the 21st, the following week. And that's where I think we can dig into this a little bit further.
Do we have other shovel-ready projects that we can, because when we apply, you have to have projects already in place. Is that right?
That's correct. We would have to analyze this within the CIP updates and talk about if there's certain ones that we'd like to have, make sure are shovel ready so that we can apply for this funding.
When do we need that shovel-ready status by?
October.
Oh, by
By
October.
the time we apply. Like the NOFA hasn't been published yet, but it's typically in the fall, and I think last year it was either October or November, so.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, I guess just a detailed question. Under licensing and permits, I see like there's I guess it might be more towards the gym, but I see like there's a spike under building permits. So it was at 250 last year, it goes to 300, and then back to 255. And a couple of those spike, and then they go right back down. I mean, at the net bottom, I mean, it's like a $60,000 swing. How are we projecting those to go up, and then that we're projecting them to be down in the next year? I was trying, because I think it was all revenue, right?
Is one for last year, this past year?
Yeah, I mean, it's just saying, like, for example, last year there's under building permits is 250,000. This next year is projected to be at 300, and then it's dropped down to 255.
And I think that has to do with different projects that are expected to that are coming in, Tesla, and but then 38th Avenue is a really big project. It's not Tesla's started pulling permits already, so that's just like the final number for Tesla is what I understand, and then. But we did not include 38th Avenue, and so at the time that if 38th Avenue came out, those revenue projections will go much higher.
All right, thank you. And then just as a compliment, it's nice to see you not talking about the housing element, and have the abilities to go out and now work in the other part of your economic development. And it's just the updates that we get from the city manager and things that you're reaching out to are all going to be positive things that are going to help take the city. We talk about PD getting this revenue. We're going to be looking at you and your department of making those relationships and encouraging people to come to Capitola. So thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for those outreach and those updates. And like I said, it's nice to see you being able to look at something other than a housing element. So thank you.
Thanks.
So did I hear you correctly? The 38th Avenue project is not in these numbers?
No, so 38th Avenue has had a hard time getting the funding, so they're not in our building projected revenues in terms of that. But once a project comes in, then the revenues and expenditures associated with 38th Avenue will have to be re-looked at.
Is the numbers for charges for services and the licensings and permits do go up significantly? Can you sort of explain what those are based on? I sort of thought it was 38th, but that's not in here.
So I believe Tesla is a rather large project that we have under review right now. And I think also, I don't have I'm going to grab my.
That's okay.
But I think it also possibly has to do with our hiring structure. And I'm not sure, Jim, if you're taking a closer look at this, but we now have
right. So
that'd be more that.
Yeah. So we are fully staffed now. We have 2 assistant planners, or an assistant, an associate?
Yeah, we have an assistant and associate planner. So I need to clarify, are you looking at building or planning?
Well, I was looking at building, planning, and economic development. You're all lumped in together now. But it sounds like there's definitely going to be an increase with the new projects coming in, whether it's, and hopefully the 38th Avenue will make the number even bigger.
Yeah, and another trend that's happening in planning right now is we used to collect a lot of planner cost recovery within our department, and we've gone towards, at the last fee schedule, we modified a lot of our planner cost recovery to fees. So we had you take like the average planner cost recovery over time. So in our numbers, as we're going through it, there's more going towards fees than planner cost recovery. But I'll sit down with Jim this week and make sure that we have the revenues correct. Sorry.
That's great. Thank you.
On that, I'm sorry, on that number at, like with the 38th Avenue project, when you speculate what that fees come in at, do you also then account for consultants' fees? Because that would get outsourced, right?
Correct.
So we'll see just the net of what the gain is to the city just for exact permit costs, those, so revenue and expenditures. Okay, thank you. Right.
I wanted to circle back on that question about rezoning the village to increase flexibility for other businesses to come in and fill the space.
Yes.
I asked this question earlier, so.
Yep. So relooking at the village, different ideas that right now there's been there's limitations on certain uses that can come into the village. Ideas that we've talked about are, recently I was approached about a tattoo parlors, whether or not to allow them in the village. There's actually no tattoos allowed in Capitola at all. So that's a revenue source that's leaving the city. Also thinking about expanding like bed and breakfast use in the village. And that's right now a conditional use permit. And so just that is something we can definitely do as we're going through code cleanups. This initial code update that we're working on, I wasn't anticipating that, but that's something we can work into our code updates and within in-house with staff.
Yeah, I'd like to see that as a goal to go to Planning Commission to update and increase some flexibility and expand the uses.
So one of the things we haven't mentioned when we talked about parking revenue is there is a section of the village which is on, I call it the backside of Capitola Avenue, but the residential area where there is no paid parking. And that's the area that has sort of the residential overlay on it. And in years ago, when that was all put into place, that was because it really was a residential area. People lived there. Now that, vacation rentals have become so popular in the village, I don't have the exact numbers, but from walking around and looking at the signs and what's going on, my expectation is the majority of those units are now short-term vacation rentals. And it seems to me if that area is, really not residential anymore, because I consider vacation rentals to be a commercial activity, have we ever thought about looking at adding paid parking in that area?
I could speak to this because the Coastal Commission, we can look into it. When we last did our overhaul of the zoning code updates, they did have us put pretty strong language about expanding our parking areas, the permit parking areas.
I'm not
This is more of a
about
fee.
permit. I'm talking about putting parking meters or parking banks or whatever we're using to collect money that we use in the rest of the village.
We did look at that. We did look at that a long time ago. And I think it was a long time ago. I think your husband may have been on the Parking and Traffic Commission actually at the time, if I remember. And there was significant pushback at that point, but it has been probably 10 or 15 years.
I mean, I just think that whole neighborhood has changed significantly in 10 or 15 years. And, we're looking for revenue, we're looking at parking, and it's one of our main things. I think it would be worth re-looking at that and seeing if it made sense. Particularly with using the parking banks or the way you pay on your phone system, my recollection was one of the disadvantages of doing it 15, 20, maybe 30 years ago was the cost of the parking meter, because we were using parking meters at that time, and it cost so much to put a parking meter in for each space that it didn't make economic sense. But we're long past that time.
Yeah.
Can you just clarify, where you're talking, what street?
Well, I'm talking about Cherry Avenue.
San Jose.
and San Jose and the streets that come off there. As I said, it used to be quite a, concise, very influential residential neighborhood, but I think that's changed over the last 15 years or so. So I just think it's something we should look at.
I had just a couple quick questions. In regards to, you'd mentioned looking into launching a down payment assistance program, and I was wondering if this isn't our city employee related.
No, this was something from our housing element, and a commitment to do a down payment assistance program, and it would come out of our housing trust fund. So
Okay, now I kind of remember. I was just clarifying. Thank you. And then I feel like I ask this every year. What about the hotel on Hill Street?
I know
The sore subject.
I was almost
Okay.
So I have reached out to the owner multiple times, and at this point, I haven't been getting responses.
Shovel ready.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for due diligence. I
Yes.
appreciate that.
We've also been talking with Swenson regularly for the village site, and so I'm hoping that will happen
Okay.
at a faster rate than the Hill project has happened. So,
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On to community services and recreation. Welcome, Nikki.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. So the Community Services and Recreation Department accomplishments of this last budget, we provided beach lifeguard services to event organizers and also through the end of October. We also enhanced the junior guard program by redistributing age divisions. This allowed for junior guard instructors to have smaller groups for those for their age divisions in order to have more effective instruction. And then we also sustained a very robust schedule of classes as well as our summer camp program during the community center remodel. We provided programming on the wharf with fun, friendly activities. So we did 3 Boogie on the Wharf in an event series. We also did 2 new music events. There was a New Music Sundays, which was featuring local youth bands. It was very well-loved an event. And then we also did dueling pianos and as a new fresh offering for the community. And then celebrated a 10th annual plein air. There were new artist engagement opportunities, as well as it had a record attendance for the exhibition. Next slide, thank you. And then for the goals for this upcoming budget, enhance the structure of the beach lifeguard services and junior guard program. We're also looking at strengthening partnership with the county agencies, multiple types of agencies, in order to expand regional initiatives. Develop a new community center rental package. We have an opportunity with this brand new, beautiful community center, and we anticipate that a lot of people will be interested in taking advantage of what it offers. And so we will need to look at what all needs to be communicated the rental package piece that goes to that. We'll also increase the capacity of Camp Capitola and utilize the park features and the Treasure Cove playground. And then also utilize lessons learned from the 2 new music events that we provided. Dueling Pianos and New Music Sunday will continue, but we have some improvements for the series, and I'll get into that in the next slide. And then, so as part of the Art and Cultural Commission's recommendations that are included in this budget, for public art, we are working on wrapping up the Monterey Avenue railing project. It is nearing completion. Hopefully it will be dedicated in June. It will be the upcoming Art and Cultural Commission meeting on next Tuesday is going to be reviewing this project as well as reviewing artists for the Rispin Reflecting Pool Public Art Project. So that project has gone through a call to artists, and the commission, there's an ad hoc committee that has selected a list of artists to be reviewed at the entire commission, and that will also be happening at the upcoming Tuesday meeting. But all of the budgetary activity is going to be happening next budget. And then also we have a bandstand weather vane project that the commission has been working on, and it is in the same phase. There's going to be artist review, and hopefully soon council will be receiving presentations from these artists for these projects, so that you can definitely expect in the summer. The Art and Cultural Commission also evaluates what public art needs maintenance. This actually lives in the Public Works budget, and previously the signal boxes had the ones that have murals on it along 41st. About half of them received an update due to the addition of a battery backup, and so the Art and Cultural Commission has recommended that the other half receive a similar update. And then the event series. So the Makers Market has been paused. New Music Sunday, as I previously said, will be continuing. Previously, it all happened in the fall, and for this upcoming one, we're going to be doing the end of May, but then also in August, kind of break it up for the youth. We're hoping that's going to be a good formula. Dueling Pianos, there were a lot of people that were very excited about it, but we felt that the day that we hosted those events was a poor fit. And so instead, for this upcoming budget, it's going to be moved to Wednesdays after the completion of the Twilight Concert series. So Twilight Concerts, and the final one is like August 17th-ish. And so that last August of the Wednesday will be Dueling Pianos, and then there'll be another Dueling Pianos to hopefully get more people out in the village in the middle of the week, a little longer. And then status quo for Twilight Concerts, Movies at the Beach, and Plein Air. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Great. Councilmember Clark, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Orbach.
Couple, of course. One of the first questions I have to ask is because I'm the city's representative on the Senior Council Advisory Committee. And one of the things that we talk about at every meeting we go to is, the problems that seniors have with being isolated and not having activities. Are there any plans to increase the number of classes and activities for seniors in the recreation program?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're quite proud of is that we didn't have to cancel any of our current senior activities when we moved from the community center to our temporary site. Mm-hmm. We maintained all of our classes through the entire process. We're hoping that with our beautiful new building, we're going to attract more people that are interested in teaching out of the community center. Mm-hmm. With our classes program, that's all done with independent contractors. And so we're really dependent on those independent contractors proposing what they're interested in doing. And with more space, more room, we're going to be able to get back into the business of reaching out to people and saying, hey, you kind of do a cool thing. Would you be interested in this? So we're going to be doing a little bit more recruitment, which we're really excited to have the opportunity. And then there's lots of other opportunities that we can explore where similar cities do specific senior programmings. They usually require grant funding because usually senior programs is a fully funded type of program. It's not a fee-based program in the way that classes are.
Thank you. I have the Plan Air. I was just wondering about that program because I don't honestly really understand how it works, but the cost seems like it's going up about $10,000 for next year to do that. But I'm under the impression that the program actually makes money as well, but we really didn't have any information on that. So could you sort of elaborate why the Plan Air costs are going up and what happens to the money that the Plan Air's program makes?
Yeah, so the short answer is that it goes back into the event budget. The Plein Air has a unique model where we invite artists to come and paint this town, and then they're included in an exhibition. And so the buzz of the event is really this community engagement around these artists that are interested in their town. And so it's very captivating to just show up to an exhibition and walk around and just see all these really beautiful images of Capitola. And so they are motivated to participate because they like the competition. It gives them a reason to paint, but then they also do sales. And so we collect a portion of those sales as part of putting on the event. And then the artists also receive a portion. I believe it's 30/70, somewhere around there. And so the cost that it takes to put on the event is recovered with the portion of the sales that we keep to cover the costs of all the expenses.
And so you make more money than it costs to put on the event, what I'm hearing. And that money that you make that's more than what the event makes goes into helping other events take place.
Yeah, it's not by much, but yeah, it does help because it's seasonal staffing that is also included in that budget. And when it comes to direct cost recovery, the seasonal staff are included in some of that.
Okay. And the one other question I had is that, and I just need sort of an explanation on this, like the expenses that the Park and Rec are actually going to go up this year. And it looks like they go up about $50,000 more, or maybe a little more. Let's say $50,000 more than the revenue increases that we're going to have coming back. I think what I added it up was the new revenue was going to be about $106,000, and the new expenses are about $167,000.
So in talking with Director Malberg, we've already identified a few errors in that budget, such as the seasonal staff hours that are included. And so that's probably leading to a really big discrepancy that we need to look at. Because the seasonal,
about 5,000 new hours for seasonals.
which is incorrect. I did a quick calculation after speaking with him, and my calculation is only 1,300, which is, most of that is in response to the addition of a recreation assistant, which is our front desk staff, because we anticipate to have more activity at the community center. And then the other portion of that is because we did increase the Camp Capitola capacity, so we needed to add a staff to compensate for that increased capacity. And so it is a smaller number. So I do think that there's a few errors that we kind of need to sort out. But other than that, the actual expenses, things that we buy, most of that is status quo. And we did add in a dollar amount for furniture for the community center, because when we moved out of the community center, we left behind or disposed of some very, very old furniture that was actually a workers' comp hazard. And so we needed to replace that. And so now that we're moving into our nice new building and we have appropriate storage for all of this furniture, we're going to be purchasing more appropriate lightweight furniture that'll be good for staff to move.
Do you have a cost number for that?
For the furniture, currently in the budget, it's at 15,000.
Okay.
And for, like, just for the tables alone, the estimates that we're currently working on so that we're ready to buy in July are coming in at around 8,000 and 10,000.
Yeah. No, furniture, that kind of furniture is expensive. Yeah, thanks. We'll just wait and see how it all works out when you guys sort out your hours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I had the same question about the hours. I was wondering what was going to be the increase, but if it's just an error. But the 1,300 additional hours of staff time was for what? I was confused by that.
So right now we have one rec assistant who is a part-time employee, so under 900 hours within the calendar year. And so that individual, we're anticipating needing 2 of them because the community center will likely have a lot more demand, particularly on the weekends. And so we need to have staff that are able to be present and available for rentals, and then just the more activity. And so that's a portion of it. And then the other portion of those hours is due to the increase in the Camp Capitola capacity. It's about 400, a little more than 400 hours for that.
So is that additional staff or staff hours?
It's staff hours. It's seasonal staff hours. So it takes the form of 2 people that fill those roles, but that's the total hours, which is about 1,300.
Okay, and then and maybe between yourself and maybe Councilmember Clark, could you just give me an overview, like how the Arts Commission interacts with like some of these decisions that get made with how the public art works and all that stuff, and then how's that whole interaction and the budget development part of that work?
So annually, before February, if not in February or before, the proper way to say that, the Art and Cultural Commission meets for a very specific budget goals conversation. And we address these exact 3 topics. We discuss what projects they would like to do for public art. They have the projects that they're working on, and they don't actually get a budget allocation until they get close to doing a call to artist, because the Art and Cultural Commission might workshop a public art concept for a while before it's ready to go. And then they also address maintenance. And then the larger conversation is the event series. Historically, we've had the bottom tier there of events. And then last year, the Art and Cultural Commission really wanted to add some new events. And so that's where Dueling Pianos and New Music Sundays came in. For the most part, the Art and Cultural Commission has maintained a status quo for their events. And that was their staff recommendation this year when we were developing the budget goals, was to maintain a status quo. And they actually decided to remove an event as opposed to adding any.
All right, thanks. So just what I heard is back to Jim, just went, so there'll be some adjustments made to the budget. So when we look at Parks and Rec, and it's has a negative hit of $60,000, that's probably not realistic at this point. It'll be a lot less when we see the revised.
That's what I would anticipate once we get the changes in.
Okay.
And then when we do those changes also, just before we get that question, we'll list each change that we make, so it won't be like an Easter egg hunt where you have to go try to find them. We'll keep a list of everything that's changed.
Thank you.
I'll add to the Arts and Cultural Commission that a lot of the things are community driven. So we get a lot of the ideas from the community, and some of the stuff that we paused was also feedback from the community. So I would say most of it's driven from the community.
I think that's a great comment to add. I think that as representatives, they have a lot to contribute of what we end up talking about and how we came about even doing dueling pianos, because it was something that was community driven. Yeah.
Well, I think it's great that we have this recreation program in town. I think it's something that we can be really proud of. And in looking at this particular budget, the amount of general fund money that goes in to make this program happen, it has not gone up in year. I mean, it's basically the same amount of money that the program was spending, 10, 15 years ago. So I think it's great that we continue to run it and that you have these classes that basically pay for themselves by the people who take them. So thanks.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if there's insight. Were the makers markets not well attended, or what was the reason for not continuing?
Just like Councilmember Clark said, there was a lot of community feedback that was given to the commission when it came time for them to make a decision as to what events they were going to recommend. And they decided to pause it this year based on that community feedback.
Okay. Cool, thank you. Any other questions? Great. Okay, we'll take it back to Jim.
Okay, to just kind of start wrapping up now, some of the things that we've talked about tonight, some of the things that we haven't talked about yet, as far as different ways for balancing the budget, we had mentioned that staff had come up with, holding the MSO position frozen and a couple of other things. Other things that we could look at instead. We've already talked about increasing the parking rates, so we'll come back with information on that. During the goal setting, one council member mentioned going citywide with short-term rentals. So that's something we haven't really put any analysis into, but something we could look at. I think for that one, just based on the reaction of FAC members last night, would be a very long haul to get that with the community outreach required to go expand the STRs into neighborhoods. CalPERS, utilizing the CalPERS trust we've talked about, so we'll come back with more information. The free holiday parking, we've talked a little bit about. And also the business license modernization is probably that's probably needs about a 1-year lead time to get onto a ballot. So that's something that I think that we should probably have a conversation at the FAC. And then if given kind of the direction there, start that process of getting ready for the 2028 election if council desires that. I told them that's more of a longer term solution than this fiscal year solution. We did meet again at the Finance Advisory Committee last night, and another idea that had come up was the potential use of utilizing the OPEB trust, which Councilmember Westman brought up tonight. Some of the requests for the second draft, the FAC will be meeting again on the 26th, so after you'll see the CIP before they will, but we're doing that because sales tax number won't come out until around the 20th. Are to improve the transparency. So we've talked about the financial transparency software. Councilmember Westman also mentioned that expanding the 5-year forecast and providing more information on the expenditure side, similar to what we do on the revenue side, will be something. And then, as I just mentioned, any changes that we make between drafts will maintain a running list, so you can kind of go through and track all of those. So council action for tonight is to any other questions that you have, details that you'd like to see for the presentation at the next hearing, feedback on tonight's budget, and then any other discussion points and key changes.
One more. I just have one more.
You can't sit next to each other anymore.
I just have one more. So we've asked the departments to trim back on their training and travel budget. And the council has a training and travel budget allowance. And it's my understanding that there's $15,000 in there, basically $3,000 per council member. That's, discretionary. And so I think we ought to look at giving some of that money back, since the other departments in the city are doing that. And my suggestion was maybe to give back $9,000. That would leave $6,000 in there, because there is a potential of having 3 new council members come in. And I think, being able to go to some of the league events and have that training when you arrive as a new council member is important. So my suggestion was going to be to us that we give back 9,000 of the 15,000. So there's a little more money.
I think this year we gave it up, or
We gave up the 15,000 this year for doing the draft plans for the grant, which is not going to go forward. So,
I'd agree.
okay.
I did have a summary question. So I've heard a couple things that they're added on to this budget outside of salaries, PERS, and the minor or the supplies that it takes to run the city. That if you want to call it extras, we're looking at a financial add-on for you for projections of like $20,000. We heard that rec is looking at getting $15,000 worth of equipment for the rec center. And that we're looking at potentially a police car and a Cushman or some sort of other thing. Is there anything else that is in this budget that hasn't been identified that might be viewed as like an extra or a goal or something that we haven't heard? Or are those the only add-ons about just being fiscally sound and just trying to operate for a year?
The only other thing that I can think of is from the meeting that you and I had when we were discussing the replacing, I think it's a replacement generator at the courtyard, which is in the budget. The tables and chairs, the 15K is already in the budget. The software that we were talking about for the transparency stuff, I would have to add back in. So that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. The supplies increase, I would call that more of an inflationary increase. I think we've just been under budgeted for a couple of years, and this is more of a catch-up than it is we're frivolously spending on supplies.
Can we just elaborate on the generator then?
I'm going to defer to Public Works Director.
Hi, so we have an emergency generator at the courtyard when the power goes out. It's an old diesel generator that died over the summer, or not over the summer, over the spring, maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. So we currently have no backup power at the yard, which does kick on several times a year, generally during the winter, generally in the middle of the night. So that is for a replacement generator. There is a possibility that we could buy one used. There is a possibility we can repurpose the one that we took from the community center. However, that one is natural gas, so that would require some utilities upgrades.
So this generator is a permanent generator?
Yes.
I was just wondering, have you thought about looking outside, like having it more of a temporary one that you could, they have these larger ones that are towable that you could maybe use if we needed it at another place, or is that just not something that's feasible?
We do have a portable generator, I believe. It may not be up to our current air quality standards, but we do have a diesel portable generator, but this one is specifically for the courtyard and the building. I will say as we have more electric vehicles at the yard, that's going to become more important that we have a reliable source of backup power.
So was there like any cost run on like repairing the one that we have, or purchasing a used or new one, or do we know those numbers at all?
There could be a cost reduction. That's something I would have to go research further.
Would we like to hear about that next meeting? Maybe just to see what we can scrape up maybe. Okay.
I would like to see, if you could look at the portable. I know like up at Gales, certain times they just rent one and a huge one comes in and they're pre-wired. And so like they'll run their whole entire operation off that. And I was just wondering if that's something, you're the expert in your department, is that we have the flexibility that you could use that somewhere else, or if that does not work for you, but that's up to you.
I will also allude to the feasibility of a portable generator.
So one other thing I did want to note, Councilmember Jensen's question about sort of anything else that's sort of extra in the budget. One point we haven't gone through is like every single one of the contracts. So that is something we could come back and identify. A lot of the contracts are not really voluntary. We have to do them, but some of them are. So we can come back and flag all those, and you can take a look at them in the next budget hearing if you want.
My question is more just, again, that we're able to go out to the community and say, obviously we had to buy a car and we need an emergency generator. We're opening up a community center, we have to have tables, and we have to be able to have a 5-year budget plan. So I'm just looking for talking points and making sure there was nothing else I missed. So thank you with that.
Yeah.
Oh. Katie's
I
talking.
think just to add to Jamie's point, I just wanted to bring up last year during budget, there was a one-time funding of $20,000 towards economic development. That is not in the budget. So that's one of those items that at this point, we've spent approximately 12,000 of those funds. So, but I'm spending currently on that hotel analysis for the zoning update. So just one example of, that I know of a contract that we may want to budget for rather than come back and try to find.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see that. I think we're seeing, maybe if there's a possibility at the end of the day, if that gets increased, I think that investment is we're starting to see what that's doing. So thanks for sharing that, because that's important to make sure that's there.
Any other questions before public?
Well, I would like to take one moment to thank Jim and his staff, because I've been with them as Margot has a lot of hours the last 2 days, and you guys have done a great job. Thank you.
All right, we'll come out to public comment. Any comments on this item? You'll have 3 minutes. Hi, welcome.
Thank you very much, Leslie Nielsen. And I'd like to echo the thank you to the finance staff. Lita and Luis work very hard to get this done with the tools that they have, primarily spreadsheets. So thank you very much, Jim and staff. Before I go on to the topic I had taken some notes on, I would just like to point out the conversation about the TOT tax. I think let's just revisit that, because the city manager said 1% of 2.2 million is 20,000, and you have to go out to, voter approval and so on. It's actually the 2.2 million is based on the revenue generated by the hotels and short-term rentals, which it would be 183 million would generate 2.2 in TOT tax. So the 1% would be on 183 million, not on the 2.2 million. So I think it would be worth looking into if I did the math right. So it could be potentially $183,000 revenue uplift. Does that make sense? You just reverse engineer the number to figure out 2.2 million is 12% of what? And that's where the 1% goes. And so as a short-term rental owner, I think I would love to charge my guests another percent. Just looking for ways to raise money. Okay, so my comment is more about the 5-year plan. The budget narrative states the general fund becomes structurally imbalanced in 28-29, yet the document only presents projections currently through 27-28 and stops short of a transparent multi-year general fund projection showing the full structural deficit and options to address it. So I would really strongly emphasize why including a robust, comprehensive 5-year projection directly in the adopted budget document is so important from a fiscal management perspective. A 1 or 2 year budget shows whether a city is balanced today, but does not show whether the city is financially sustainable over time. Many of the city's largest obligations, CalPERS costs, labor agreements, infrastructure maintenance, compound and grow over multiple years, and those pressures often do not become visible until several budget cycles later. A 5-year forecast is not simply an accounting exercise. It is one of the most important fiscal management tools a city has because it allows the council and the public to identify deficits before they become emergencies, understand the long-term impact of labor and pension obligations, Labor agreements will be negotiated when they expire in 2027, and now is not too soon to take a hard look at that. Evaluate reserve adequacy, assess how dependent the city is on volatile revenues like parking, prioritize infrastructure and capital investments responsibly, make gradual, measured policy adjustments instead of reacting to sudden financial crises. Without multi-year projections, it becomes very difficult to distinguish between a budget that is balanced temporarily and one that is structurally sustainable, and to take action on change early enough to manage the required change. Well-managed cities include 5 to 10-year forecasts, and we should use that software and get that done and have check-ins way before the next year on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? All right. Seeing none. Any extra council comments, or did we fill Jim's plate enough for our next meeting?
I just have a question regarding projecting out, like I think it's highlighted in there that the budget's going to be financially, or the budget will be unstable in 28, 29. Our projections are out for 1 year. In this update, I mean, I just want to be careful. Like, I feel like last year we had, as a council, we were told that we had $100,000 to allocate some money to do some things. And I just want to be careful I don't fall into that this year. Looking ahead, if I knew what the budget was going to look like at 28, 29, how are we going to be able to understand that? I think there's been some great ideas of how to save money, but that's not to save money, to spend money, to save money that for the future. So it will just soften the blow in 28, 29. I worked in public entity before, and I understand that you start to make these small changes now definitely makes it a lot easier than making catastrophic changes in long range. I was just wondering what your both thought process of how you're going to recommend some of these saving ideas, but not to spend the money and to help ease what it looks like out in a couple of years.
Well, I think number one is you're absolutely right. Looking ahead, we've always used our multi-year model to sort of look ahead and see where the problems arise. I think the council understands, and I think I used your first year on council last year, but how tight it is, sort of how tight the Capitola budget is. I did have the opportunity when I was looking at those other cities, our peer cities, to sort of see the fund balance in some of these places. Pismo Beach, for example, I think they're carrying $40 million in fund balance right now. They've approved multiple sort of resort hotels over the last 30 years. So I think we need to keep an eye on these things. There have been a fair number of economic development opportunities over the last 20 years that have come up to the city, and I can only think of 1 or 2 of them that have actually come to pass. So when they come along, I think we need to really grab for them, and we need to look at some of the other ideas. They may not be big ticket items, the parking meter rates, looking at OPEB. We're constantly looking for those little items, because at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to manage through this PERS increase. I mean, even if it peaks out after next year, which I hope it does, we're going to have to live with that for a while. So there's going to have to be a lot of, I think, foresight and hard decisions as we look at budgets for the next coming years.
I just don't want to leave a council in 28, 29, this catastrophic budget that they have to, look at severe reductions. And so anything we could do today, and then having a projection out, Jim, is that something that you're able to do without the software, to project out at least to 28 and 29 to tell us what that is until you get?
Our current model that we use goes out 10 years. So the software that we're talking about would take the model that we use and put it up on the website and make it readable to the public. Right now, it's just a big, messy Excel spreadsheet that would probably generate more questions than answers. But yeah, we have a 10-year forecast and we use it.
I guess I apologize. I'll say just if we save $200,000 this year out of our budget and we carry forward, what does that reflect and look like, in 28, 29? So just trying to keep us all in line to make sure that we're looking at how to save forward.
The biggest challenge we've had is we get these numbers from CalPERS that says you're going to go up, $100,000 a year, and then it goes up $400,000 a year. So we do this forecast and it all looks okay, and then CalPERS comes out with another number and blows up the whole thing, and we start over. That's been the cycle for several years.
The biggest thing, I think, from our standpoint, we've proposed a balanced budget, but is reestablishing the reserves and the fund balance position, because that's kind of the resiliency for the city. That's the resiliency piece. You don't want to hand the next city council like, oh, by the way, hey, guess what? We're getting structurally unbalanced and we've spent down the reserves and all the fund balance. So I think that's kind of the first point is we got to get back to that level. And we do have a lot of reimbursements that are still pending. And I'm hopeful that with the one-time funding, we're going to be able to do that this next year. And then we just need to keep our eye on that balanced budget figure moving forward.
Thank you.
I think one of the most important things is that Capitola is going to have to look at ways to generate new revenue. And it's going to involve some pretty, in some ways, controversial projects in the community, like a hotel in the village, which brought out a lot of people, all the development that's going to take place on the mall. And I think it's going to be important. I won't be here to do it, but I think the council is going to have to provide a lot of leadership to the community about how important it is that there's going to be some changes that are going to take place to allow the community to continue to serve its residents and grow and sustain itself. So it's not going to be easy, but I think we're going to have to look hard and have some leadership from the council and the staff about what things actually mean financially to this community.
Any closing comments?
I'd like to just thank the entire staff and the community's members that are on the FAC. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everybody, so much for all of your hard work. And item 6 is adjournment. So take care of yourselves and one another. Thank you.